Where the hell do I begin talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Not Tobe Hooper's original seminal classic, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That Netflix movie.
So, on the 18th of February, Texas Chainsaw Massacre was released straight to Netflix and was directed by David Blue Garcia and written by two people. One of those was Fede Alvarez, who had previously brought us the remake of Evil Dead and Don't Breathe. This new Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie is a direct sequel to the original movie and ignores all of the other movies in the franchise, and this is the second time that a direct sequel has been made in the franchise. The first time would be Texas Chainsaw 3D. Texas Chainsaw Massacre attempts to do what Halloween 2018 did, being a direct sequel and bringing back the same characters. The only thing is Halloween 2018 did it in a way that was enjoyable and successful. Don't get me wrong, there are some enjoyable scenes in this film, but that's not enough to make it a good movie. The film follows four young adults who, from my understanding, plan to auction off properties in the area to bring new life into a town named Harlow, which has practically become a ghost town. The young characters we are introduced to are Dante, his girlfriend Ruth, and two sisters, Melody and Lila. Things don't go as planned because whilst inspecting an orphanage, Dante and Melody are approached by an elderly woman named Ginny. She claims that she still owns the property. It also seems that there's no other people staying at the orphanage apart from Ginny and one other individual, and of course that would turn out to be Leatherface. So that's problem number one. Supposedly, this new movie takes place 50 years after the events of the original film. According to this new film, Leatherface in 1974 was supposed to be around the age of 16 to 20 years old, which seems very unlikely. There's no doubt that Leatherface in the original movie was a grown man and not a young adult. The main issue here is that how did Leatherface end up in an orphanage? My only reason for it is that at the end of the original movie, after Sally escaped, Drayton found out about the death of Nubbins, the hitchhiker, Leatherface's brother, and obviously knows that Sally escaped. So afterwards he disowns Leatherface and sends him away. But of course, in Texas Chainsaw 3D we do discover what happened directly after the events of the 1974 movie, but that timeline is no longer relevant. So Ginny has been looking after Leatherface for a while now, and she is forced to be removed from the house, which then causes her to have a heart attack. Leatherface tends to Ginny as she's rushed to a police van. Ruth then decides to go in the van with two other officers, Ginny and Leatherface. And this then brings us to the first kill of the movie. Leatherface's first kill really was the most inventive kill I've seen in a long time, and I was not disappointed by it. As Ginny dies in Leatherface's arms, he reaches for her oxygen tank and attempts to resuscitate her. An officer sitting next to Leatherface attempts to calm him down and grabs his hand, but of course this makes Leatherface see complete red and he breaks the officer's arm and stabs him in the neck with the bone protruding from his own arm. With his free hand, the officer reaches for his gun. Leatherface then causes the trigger to be pulled, which then leads the officer, who is driving, to be shot in the neck. Ruth begins to panic, and before anything else can happen, the van crashes into a sunflower field. And I will be honest with you, this entire scene from the moment where the van crashes was pretty awesome. When Ruth wakes up from the crash, Leatherface has gone from the van and is out in the field with Ginny's body. Ruth calls on the radio for help when she notices Leatherface skinning Ginny's face and begins to wear it as his own, and it looks like shit. Leatherface's appearance in this movie is really piss poor. The skin mask in my opinion looked terrible. I think Leatherface's appearance in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 was so much better. But the way he applied the skin mask to his face, what was going on? He just slopped it on. He didn't even tie it with string or anything. And at no point does the mask slide off his face. I realise this is just nitpicking, but it bugged me. How the hell did that skin mask stay on his face throughout the entire movie? The first half of the film, Leatherface is unmasked, and his face is shown in a few shots, and in good detail too. And because this is a direct sequel, I prefer his real face not to be shown, because his face wasn't shown in the original movie, so it would keep the character mysterious. He has no personality of his own. This is why he wears his victims' faces. Now I realise I'm already ranting, but saying all of this, Leatherface does have some memorable scenes, but one in particular really bugged me, and I'll get to it soon. But hell, at least this movie gives us a really good gory massacre. I have seen a lot of people review this movie and they do touch upon this scene, and yeah, it's fantastic. The scene on the bus where Leatherface is slaughtering the tourists was pretty neat to see. Never have we seen Leatherface just plow through people like this movie showed us. We could have seen it in Texas Chainsaw 3D during the funfair scene, but we didn't. Instead, we got a chainsaw-wielding pig-masked Jigsaw bumping into Leatherface. And Leatherface didn't even bother to kill him. This Texas Chainsaw movie does deliver some good, worthy kills. Now I want to briefly touch upon the continuity of the original and this movie. My favourite being Leatherface uses the same chainsaw he used back in 1974. He hid it away behind a wall in his bedroom while staying at the orphanage, which means when he arrived at the orphanage he still had the chainsaw? In fact, Leatherface doesn't kill anyone with this chainsaw until 53 minutes into the film. The first time he uses it is to slaughter the people on the tour bus, but then again I suppose that's a great scene to begin with. The second thing I noticed is that at times Leatherface would walk with a limp, which harkens back to the original when he was knocked over and cut his leg with the chainsaw. But at some points he will be running after his victims with no limp at all. The only movie to ever acknowledge the fact that Leatherface had a limp was Leatherface Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 3. So is that movie a direct sequel too? Before moving on to Sally's return, I do want to briefly speak about another character, and that is Lila. I actually found her to be pretty interesting. Early in the movie we see she has a bullet wound on her upper chest and later explains that she has been shot, and at one point holds a gun, but whilst holding it she freaks out. We later discover that she was at a school and a mass shooting broke out and she witnessed people dying around her. This subplot later comes back in the film, and the way it does was so well done, I thought. When Leatherface is killing everyone on the tour bus, she is lying on the floor watching it all happen, and she begins to recall the events from the school. I love that idea. Sort of, no matter where you go, the evil in the world will always be there. Now, what Texas Chainsaw Massacre attempts to do is follow in the steps of Halloween 2018, and it does so by bringing back a legacy character. In this case it would be Sally, the only survivor from the first film. I thought Sally in this movie was totally pointless. If she wasn't in the movie, it wouldn't make a difference. She's hardly in the film. Sally Hardesty definitely has her Laurie Strode moment, saying that she's waited 50 years to see Leatherface and finally end his reign of terror. There are so many similarities. Sally even looks a little like Laurie from Halloween 2018. I mean, it sticks out like a sore thumb. Okay, going ahead now, there are going to be some major spoilers, so I'm going to give you a bit of a warning right here. The moment that annoyed me the most was the sequence between Leatherface and Sally. Eventually they do share a scene together and she has Leatherface exactly where she wants him. He's sitting on his bed in the orphanage and she's pointing a shotgun right at him. She wants Leatherface to remember her and her friends who he killed that afternoon in 1974. At that point, she says to Leatherface,
"Say my name. Say you know me."
Leatherface stands from his bed, picks up his chainsaw and just walks away. Again, it's trying to be like Halloween when Laurie all this time thought that Michael was after her, when really she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Later on, whilst he's hunting down Lila and Melody, Sally catches up with him and shoots him, screaming,
Remember me now? I'm the one who got away, and I'm here to make sure you don't.
This results in Sally and Leatherface in a very short one-to-one battle. Very anticlimactic. Sally attempts to shoot him once more but has run out of shells. She takes out a knife and shanks him a few times, and ultimately Sally meets her grisly demise as Leatherface rams his chainsaw through her stomach and lifts her up, much like Michael did to the firefighters in Halloween Kills. Leatherface then disposes Sally and chucks her off his blade and into the trash on the ground. He continues to chase Lila and almost has her when all of a sudden Sally takes a few more shots at Leatherface, causing him to retreat. No doubt, Sally would have died right there and then. I mean, my god, she even has life left in her to talk to Lila.
Don't run. If you run, he'll never stop haunting you.
Sally in this film was a complete waste of time. No massive climax like Laurie and Michael in Halloween 2018. I thought maybe this movie would get a few sequels and attempt to revive the franchise, and at least try to do what Halloween 2018 did. I thought maybe down the line Sally would end up back at the farmhouse and clash with Leatherface there, but no, she was a huge disappointment. With all of that said, is there anything about this film that makes it decent? Not really. Upon first watch, I thought it was pretty good. I've seen the film 3 times now and it hasn't grown on me, and it is pretty weak. The film does deliver some fantastic kills and Leatherface does have some good screen time. Pity his appearance looks like utter garbage. I did enjoy the opening sequence, and it was good to have John Larroquette return to narrate the opening, although I thought the opening would have had an opening scroll and explained the events of the first movie. Instead, a mock documentary is shown titled The Texas Chainsaw Massacre Explained, and a store in Harlow is making a profit from the events of the first movie, having merchandise relating to the events in 1974. Other than Lila, the rest of the characters are not interesting. When reviewing this movie, Andy from Boots to Reboots perfectly said, would Scream 2022 work if the role of Sydney had been recast? Would Halloween 2018 work if Laurie Strode wasn't played by Jamie Lee Curtis, but a random old lady? The nostalgia and historical weight isn't there, because that's not Sally. If you can't bring back Marilyn Burns, then don't. The film has a few callbacks from the original. For example, on the pinboard there are newspaper clippings, the sketch of Leatherface, the graveyard corpses, and the farmhouse. But that isn't enough to make this movie good. The film even has a scene after the credits where Leatherface goes back home to the farmhouse. I would have probably enjoyed the film a little more if it took place at the farmhouse and not in Harlow. Overall, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022 is another failed attempt at trying to revive the franchise. Leatherface never seems to have any luck when a movie comes out. I actually think it's time to let this franchise end.